Hey guys, welcome to the Level 3 Beginner Guitar course, and you're with me, Rex Pearson. I hope you've been enjoying the course so far, and I hope you're improving and learning at a really good rate. This lesson is going to be about introducing some new chords. It's been a little while since you guys have covered some new chords, since we learned the open position ones, and that's mainly to give you time to practice them, to get smooth with the changes, to start learning some songs and start, having fun playing guitar. Now we're going to move it on a little bit more, and I'm going to teach you a few more chords and a little bit of theory, a little secret tip that is going to completely unlock the fretboard. You may have, when you've been learning your songs, you may have come across some 7th chords that you may not have known how to play. You might have looked it up, and the usual route that beginners take and a lot of my students take is they'll go online or they'll ask someone how to play something 7th chord, and they'll learn that on its own, and then they'll learn another one and another one and another one, and pretty soon your brain explodes. So there's too much information there to learn. What I'm going to show you is a method that allows you to play with just one shape 12 different chords without having to learn anything new. In this lesson I'm going to teach you 4 different 7th chords, the key 7th chords that you're going to use. None of this useless stuff that you don't actually need, but the real 7th chords that are used and the shapes that are most commonly used. And with that, with 4 shapes, I'm going to show you a way that you can learn 36 different chords without having to cover any new material, without having to memorize any new material. With 4 shapes, you'll be able to play 36 different 7th chords. Sounds too good to be true, but I'll show you in the next part with a little bit of theory how it goes. First, we need to learn the shapes as open positions, which is what we're going to do now. The 4 chords we're going to cover, they're all 7th chords, and they're the key 7th chords that are used in music, in pop music, rock music, jazz, used pretty much all the time. And I'm going to show you the shapes that guitarists use. So the first one is a major 7th chord, the next one is a minor 7th chord, the next one is a dominant 7th chord, and the final one is diminished 7th. If you don't know what those words mean, dominant, minor, major, check out the level 1 course, because there's a little lesson on chord qualities there that sort of describes it pretty well. So we need to learn the shapes. First one then is an A major 7th chord. Now the A major 7th chord is used quite a lot in jazz. Sounds like this. It's a 5-string chord, so you don't play the lowest 6th string. So it sounds a little bit more jazzy compared to the major chord that you guys have learnt first. The 7th, it's kind of got a more chilled, laid-back vibe about it, and that's mainly because it's used quite a lot in jazz and that sort of style of music, in blues as well. Okay, so we're going to build up the chord one note at a time, just as normal. It's very similar to the A major chord, especially if you've learnt it the way that I taught you guys, the open string on the level 1 course. It goes like this. The second finger is going to go on the 2nd fret on the D string here. The next one is going to be on the G string, and it's going to be on the 1st fret now instead of on the 2nd fret. So it just needs to shift down just a little bit. Then finally you got the 3rd finger on the 2nd fret on the B string. Now, just as normal, how we normally do these chords, you play each finger and make sure they're ringing out properly. Common problems are that the 2nd finger is going to mute the string underneath with where the 1st finger is trying to play, and that the 3rd finger may get cheeky and start muting the string that's underneath the open E string. So you got to watch out and make sure you get your hand position as I've taught you on the previous courses. Check them out if you don't know what I'm talking about. And you should have your tips on the ends, and you should be just behind the frets, not too far back, but just behind the frets. Then we pluck the 1st finger, the 2nd finger, and the 3rd finger, and then we give it a strum. Make sure all your notes are ringing out as clearly as that, and you got a beautiful A major 7th chord shape. Try to visualize this shape in your mind. Release the chord and then try and build up the shape again until you can do it quite smoothly and without having to concentrate too much on the shape. You want to be able to memorize this one shape, because in the next parts I'm going to be showing you how you've actually learned 12 different major 7th chords in that one shape. So let's move on to the next chord. That was your major 7th. The next chord that you're going to be learning is going to be a minor 7th chord, and this one's going to be an E minor 7th chord because it's the most commonly used shape for minor 7th chords. It's one of the easiest chords to play in the open position. It gets a little harder when we start shifting it around, but for now it's one of the easiest. And I want you to use a finger to play this one that you're going to change when we move the chords around a bit. You're going to use the second finger, not the first or the third, and you're going to place it on the 2nd fret on the A string, just here. That is it. If you just play that note on its own, make sure you're fretting it correctly, make sure you're just behind the fretboard towards the headstock, and then it's a 6-string chord. Make sure, and the common problem is that the 2nd finger mutes the D string underneath it. Make sure you're on your tip of the finger there, only pushing down as hard as you need to, not too hard. Strum all 6 strings. Make sure nothing is being muted there. Probably the easiest chord you'll ever learn on guitar is the E minor 7th chord. So again, just try to remember that shape. The 2nd finger down there and all the rest are open strings. Alright, 3rd chord then. We're going to be looking at the dominant chord. And we're going to be learning an E dominant chord. It looks very similar to the E major, so if you've covered your open position chords, line yourself up on an E major. That's the 1st finger on the 1st fret on the G string, it's the 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the A string, and it's the 3rd finger on the 4th string, the D string, on the 2nd fret. Okay, that is an E major chord. You should be very comfortable with that now if you followed the course so far. All you got to do to make it dominant is release the 3rd finger, this one here. Just release it off and make sure you've got an open string ringing in between your 2nd and 1st fingers. What usually happens here is the 2nd finger, because it's got quite comfortable with the 3rd finger fretting that note, it's actually probably resting on the open D string, and it won't sound, it will sound something like this. So you need to make sure that you've got on the tips, good hand position, and you get that open D ringing out. So pick the 1st finger, the 2nd finger, and then a full strum. Make sure all the strings are ringing out nice and clearly. Then try and visualize this shape, dominant shape. Think dominant in your head. It's a dominant 7th chord, and we're on an E dominant 7th. Release your hands, try and place it back onto the fretboard in time, okay? Final chord then is the diminished chord. Now, I didn't mention before about the other two. The minor 7th is again used quite a lot in jazz, just like the major 7th chord, and it has a slightly more floaty feeling compared to the sad, sort of mellow minor chord. The dominant chord is a really strong chord that wants to move to another chord. It's used quite a lot to create tension in music. Sometimes people pause on it and then they resolve it. So it creates tension. Major 7th. That just gives you, I wanted to give you guys a little idea of, you know, what each chord is used for, because that's pretty useful knowledge, because it's fair enough learning a major 7th chord, but if you don't know when to use it or in what context to use it, it's kind of useless knowledge. So, final one is diminished. Now this is one of the most, what we call dissonant chords that you can get. Dissonant means that it clashes and it sort of goes against the ear, goes against the grain. It's used quite a great deal in things like metal, death metal, anything that wants to create a lot of tension and make you feel a bit like, oh, that sort of grating feeling that music can sometimes have. It's probably a diminished chord that's causing it. And just like the dominant chord, it wants to move, it wants to resolve, it wants to get away from itself and find a nice stable major chord or something like that. So a diminished chord then. We're going to be learning an E diminished 7th chord, and it goes like this. 1st finger on the 1st fret on the A string here, the 2nd finger on the 2nd fret on the D string, the 3rd finger on the 2nd fret on the B string, so make sure you skip over the G and you play on the B. This is a 6-string chord like before, so you've got a diminished chord. Now listen to the tension that creates. Sounds very, very tense and it wants to resolve to a major chord, for example. So with your 4 7th chord shapes there, I've tried to show you the most useful ones that are used in today's playing. You've got a major 7th, a minor 7th, a dominant 7th and a diminished 7th. Now I know it might have been quite hard to memorize those shapes, but really try and spend the time so that you're not having to look at a chord diagram to learn it, so that if I say to you play a dominant 7th chord, you can play your E dominant 7th chord. In the next part, we're going to be looking at how these 4 shapes have actually unlocked the fretboard so that you can play 36 different chords, different major 7th chords, minor 7th chords, dominant 7th chords and diminished 7th chords. Might sound too good to be true that with that amount of effort you've actually unlocked all of those chords, but it's just a tiny little bit of theory, and it's something that without a teacher you probably wouldn't have known, and it will save you a great deal of time memorizing all these different shapes that are out there, when really you only need to remember a certain amount to unlock a lot of the fretboard. So I hope you remember those chords, remember to practice them, remember to get the visualization in your head so that you can play them, and then we're gonna, in the next part, look at how we unlock the fretboard. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. I hope you check out the website rexpearson.com, where you'll find more lessons, more songs and more courses and exams for you guys, totally free, and it's even free to sign up and be a fully fledged member. So I'll see you guys in the next part.